Good afternoon.
Hi.
Hello, how are you doing?
Well, I'll give you a little hint. I do better when I start the right class. For some reason, when you guys weren't in my other class that I went to go start, go figure that one out. It's like, wait a second, these guys are always there. What's going on? So, anyway, okay, so I got it. We're good. We're all back to normal. Um, so today should be a little bit short, but I do want to do a couple of quick housekeeping things, just as an FYI. Um, First thing first is um, I should have everything graded. I thought I had everything graded, and I didn't. I messed up. So my apologies. I missed something I thought I had graded. Um, I started to. Oh wait, no, I didn't finish. Actually, I started to grade it, and I ran out of time to finish. No, wait, I did finish grading them. My brain is all fried. Let me share a screen. So the resume two, um, I had started to grade those and I forgot to finish grading them. So they're all finished being graded now. So you're good. And we have two more um, uh, homework assignments that are due, and then we'll have one project that'll be due afterwards. So um, those are posted online. They're not due to next week. You should be plenty of time. This one is a review of a specific site. Um, if you go to the site, you can
Yeah,
see what it looks
I've
like.
just I've just done that one, but the other one, I don't have Note plus plus. Is that a problem? Can I use any other um like app or something? Yeah, that one.
For this one. Yeah.
Yeah,
So if you don't have Notepad plus plus, um, are you on a Mac?
I'm on Windows.
Okay, you're
There.
on Windows. Okay, so you can use Notepad plus plus. If you download it, it's a free download. Um, if you do a search for um, Notepad plus plus like that, it takes you right here, and there's a download option. So that's one option for you. Like I said, it's completely free. I'm not making you like have to do any software. You can do it inside of Notepad that comes with Windows, but it will uh, you don't get your like your color coding and stuff like that. So I have here where you got like your color coding for your tags and stuff just to help you identify things and whatnot. You don't get that. So you can do it inside regular Notepad, but it's a little bit more difficult because you're not going to get your color coding. You're not going to get your as you start to type something. Like if I wanted to start to type um, image, if I type in IM, it's going to come up and say, "Oh, you've got an image tag here you can put in." Little things like that. So, um, if you want to do section or any of those type things. So it is still very capable. I built more than one website in Notepad. I hate to admit, but I did back because that was the only thing that was an option. Um, so if you got something else that you prefer to use, that's fine too. So just kind of think about that. Okay.
Okay,
I
thank
have
you.
one question.
Yes, sir.
Could you explain a little bit the assignment of the site template? Because
Yes.
I read it and I didn't understand it much.
Okay. Okay. So I mentioned earlier on before spring break that one of the things that you're going to need to do is create a website that is kind of about you as like a portfolio of you for if you were to want to go on either to a apply for work, so that they can kind of get to know you, what types of things have you done before. So it's got like a uh, your resume, but it's also got like what projects have you worked on and stuff like that that might be relevant to an employer. Or if you're going on to grad school, what type of undergrad research have you done, or what type of um, big research or big projects have you worked on, those type of things. So typically those are going to be about 4 to 5 pages. And so what I want done for the template, I think I call it template slash or template and homepage, is obviously you want all those pages to look as similar as possible. So creating a template file that you can then go and say, okay, file, save as, and then save that um, as a new file. So you can say, okay, here's one about things where I was a leader. I was the team captain of this, or I was in student government, or things like that. And then maybe you have another page that's about um, your sports activities, because you're going to, let's say you're going to go do uh, you're applying for a job as a tennis coach or something like that, working in a pro shop. So you need to say, hey, look, I've got the experience of working, with these type of people, because I've been around this for many years, and so you can kind of have one page about your experience working in the relevant sporting uh, areas and stuff like that. So you just figure out, okay, what's like 4 or 5 pages I need to have. I can build a template that way. All the work that's going to be the same on all those other pages, I don't have to go in and redo from scratch. I can just go file, save as, and then work on that one page. Open up the template, file, save as, and work on that page. And it's just to make it a little bit easier for you. And in doing this as a assignment and making sure it gets done and all that type of stuff, I find personally, that it makes it so it's um, you don't have as much to do when you're working on your final project, um, by doing little pieces along. Your resume is going to be a big part of like a copy and paste from that into your um, into that assignment. So you've got, and then you'll have your homepage done. You kind of figure, okay, what do I want my homepage to look like? What do I want to do? So this, by the end of this assignment, when you include your resume, you include the template, so you don't have to worry about the whole design of it. You worry about you got your homepage done. You should actually have about a third of the final project done. Um, but you're going to need to kind of set up what are the parts that are going to be the same. Well, the parts that are going to be the same is you're going to have a header, and that needs to have a navigation with all of your links and stuff like that. So that means you have to know what page you're going to create. You need to have a main section for where your content for that page that's going to be unique is going to be. You'll need to have a footer section. You'll need to have your external style sheet created. Um, those are going to be the big things you have, because those things are going to be this consistent. Excuse me, consistent across um, all your pages. And so I'm just looking at trying to get some of that type of basic work kind of out of the way to make it easier for you when you go to work on your final project itself. Does that make sense?
So, listen,
What?
All right.
does it
So
make sense?
Oh yeah, but I also wanted to know if do you have to have the style within the index page?
I would recommend using an external style sheet. That way it's easier to go between page to page. If you have to add something on one page, if you put in the external style sheet, all the pages get it. So that way you don't have to go in and modify all the other pages.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Well, for this assignment, we kind of have to put like the resume, but then add some things. For example, like project leader at this class or captain of the team, blah blah, blah like things
Yep.
like that, right?
Yeah. So
So,
think of this as like an expanded resume. So your resume is at least in the U.S. and I know different countries have different, I would say, guidelines. They're not really rules; they're kind of guidelines. Um,
yeah.
but like a resume in the U.S., there's certain things you can and can't put on it, and there's certain things they recommend putting on it. So you should, like in the U.S., you would never put your photo on it. In other countries, I had a friend of mine. His wife was from the Philippines, and that was a standard part. Everyone's resume had their photo on it. That way, when they pull up the resume, they can look at the photo and look at the person across the table from them and go, okay, yeah, I'm talking to the right person. In the US, you wouldn't dare do that. In the US, your resume is going to be pretty short. It's going to be only 1, maybe 2 pages. It's going to be if you were to print it out, so obviously on a web page it's different, but if you print out, you're looking at 1, maybe 2 pages. I have to go in because of my work experience and how much work I've done over the years. I actually have to cut out parts of it um, and stuff like that to get it to fit in that space. You you tend to be very factually based. It's um, you use a lot of like bullet points and short paragraphs and stuff like that. This gives you more of a robust get to know me type of thing. Um, and the nice thing about this, especially, and I don't know if you guys are interested in going on to grad school or not, um, but you get to talk about some things that uh, like a graduate school might really find interesting, as far as like, okay, I got to look between Gaston and I've got a person over here, Robert, and who should I pick? And they say, well, okay, Gaston, I've noticed that he has this research projects that he's done, and he's listed, and he's maybe been able to put in a summary of the research work he did, or he a research paper that he wrote for a class or whatever. Um, and so that, and then I look at Robert, and Robert goes, he doesn't have anything. He took the same type classes, but I don't see anything that shows what he can really do. But over here, Gaston, he's got all these things, or something like that, and it just makes you look better. So it gives you things that you can't put on a resume, but would still be of interest to the person, wherever you're going from this step forward. Because most people, let's face it, most people don't go to undergrad school and then end their lives. There's nothing else, just sit at home and relax on the sofa. Um, you've got to go do something after this. So it gives you a way um, to kind of showcase that, so you can get moved on to the next point. Make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Awesome.
I'm just trying to like understand if do you want the resume and then the other things like kind of different pages, different sites, or you want one website that has different links and then each
Yes.
directs you? Yes, you want
Yes.
that?
So one website with
Yeah,
different pages.
yeah,
So remember, a website can have multiple pages.
yeah, yeah.
So you'll have one website, multiple pages, and they'll be all linked together. So
All right.
you'll have, um, pull this up just an example. How I have navigation links here. Now you won't have to have drop down stuff and whatnot. You just have, home, resume. Instead of news and tips, you might have resume. You might
Okay.
have, sample projects, and, different things like that. Okay.
All right. Yeah. When is it due next week? You said.
Yeah, it's due on a week from today.
Okay. Thursday. Okay.
Um, yeah, so it should be plenty of time. If you feel like it's not going to be enough time, contact me on when we have our class on Monday or Thursday, and go like, yeah, this is taking a little bit longer than we needed, um, and we can work on trying to give you a little bit more
Okay.
time.
Thank you.
In today's class shouldn't be too long, so hopefully you'll have some time at the end of the class that you could kind of work on that, and um, that way, if you get some stuff done today, you have some more questions. Tomorrow, I've got the office hours. Um, just as a reminder, if you go up under general, up at the top here, we have
I think
virtual office hours.
in the Moodle site it says the due date is Monday. So would you change it later to
It's
Thursday?
which one does it say
The,
Monday?
the site template and homepage.
Oh, dadgummit. Yeah,
I think it's
I will.
Monday.
Oh, I can't believe that. Okay, 23rd. at 4 p.m. or 2 p.m. Done.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, no need to freak you out about stuff like that. Okay. All right. So, any other questions about the assignments or anything like that?
No, thank you.
Sweet. Okay. So, last class we talked about the 4 very basic rules for improving visual design or defining visual design in general. We said that they were contrast, your continuity or repetition, which is kind of the same type thing, which is the exact opposite of contrast. But we said that without continuity, you wouldn't know when you have contrast. So if everything was different, you don't know when this is being different on purpose or for a reason. We talked about proximity, and we talked about alignment. And alignment goes hand in hand with that repetition. It's doing the same things, like the same margins on the left hand side, same images, being the same size or lined up across the top if they're in a grid fashion, those types of things. Um, so the second part I want to put in this is a lot of times when people think of visual design, they think of images, and images can be a really good way to help accentuate, for lack of a better term, the design of a website or a web page. And I've got a real simple example here. Um, and I wanted to show you some of the, we talked about how to insert images, but I want to talk about today about how to pick kind of images that do the right thing for you, using those design concepts that we talked about last class, and also some ways that we can, little tips and tricks and issues we might run into and how to fix those issues when we're using an image inside of a web page. Okay, so here I have an image that we looked at last week. It's the 2 people in the um, restaurant type of thing. And if you look at this image, there's a few things that are going to stand out automatically. You don't have to. I put it in with some text and stuff just so you could see what it looks like um, in relation to the rest of the body. The text is the lorem ipsum text. It's just kind of generic text, doesn't really mean anything. But I want to put in here so you can see how it fits in. And there's a couple of interesting things that happen. So the first thing that I notice is that anytime I have an image, if I can have people in the image, that's usually a good thing. And the reason why goes back to how our mind works, both physiologically as well as psychologically. So the physiological is the actual way that the mind and the eyeballs work. The psychologically is why. So our brains, the way our eyes work, and this is a little bit of a biology lesson. Um, if you guys aren't familiar with this, if you are, feel free to say, shut up, we already know this stuff. But the way the brain works is, and the way the eyeball works, is it takes in light, those lights get hit on a receptor, and then our brain forms the image. It's an extremely simplified description of what the eyeball does to us or for us. What a lot of people don't realize is there's a few interesting things that happen with our eyes in the when data gets sent from the eyeball to the brain and that image is created. And one of those is that first off, we don't see the whole picture. We see little bits of picture. And what we're doing is we're taking a little bit of picture here, a little bit of picture here, a little bit of picture here, and our brain starts to stitch things together. As it's stitching things together, our brain makes assumptions based upon what it sees, what it expects to see, and starts to fill in those gaps for us. Our brain is really tricky like that, and because that means that we can be deceived kind of easily if we're not careful. Um, but it also means that our brain is doing a lot of work behind the scenes that we don't realize. And if we can help it, if we understand that and help it, it makes things easier for us. One of the things that our brain does is it's looking for pictures of other people. And so if you look out at a photograph, or if you look at a magazine, or if you look at whatever, we will find and focus on people, other people first. Our brain likes to look for people, and our eyeballs, because we're pulling in sections, kind of help with that process. Um, you might say, well, why do we look for people? And it goes to a psychological reason of, number one, we like to look for familiar shapes. Another human being is going to be a familiar shape to us. So even if they're not shaped necessarily exactly like us, we like to find shapes. We like to identify things, and people are something that we can obviously identify because we're people. Um, if you think about how our brain finds patterns naturally, how it finds shapes. If you were ever, maybe as a child, maybe as a teenager, I don't know, um, maybe you still do this. You look up at the clouds, you go, oh, that cloud kind of looks like a car. That cloud kind of looks like a house or a clown or a whatever. We're finding patterns, and so we find the patterns that look like people, and we home in on them, and then we really kind of focus and see it. So we get kind of a broad view. We see something that looks familiar to us, and then we are attracted to it. It's that familiarity. But part of that familiarity is also in a deep rooted um, need for survival. And this becomes where we get into the psychological perspective. And the psychological perspective of this is, if I see another person, I can tell that they're a person. I cannot tell if they are friend or foe. So I will be drawn to look at a person or a picture of a person to identify, is this a friendly looking person that I don't have to worry about, or is this someone that that's going to be go out and mug me? You know, um, these are concerns that my brain has and that your brain has without thinking about them. So what happens is, if I get a picture with a person on it, or two people, or maybe three, my brain's going to naturally go there. And I'm going to start making judgment calls based upon what I see going on in the web page, just in that photo. And so I'll say, okay, this is a good photo. This is friendly. These people are friendly. I make a gut instinct, a gut reaction, if you would, based upon what I'm seeing in the photo about the page in general, and whether I want to stay on that page or I want to leave. And you probably have never thought to yourself, here's a picture of a person, they look scary, I'm going to leave. You've never consciously thought that, but you've probably subconsciously thought that without even realizing it. And you make the same decisions right now um, when you uh, watch a TV show or a news show. You're watching this on the news, and you go, that person just looks guilty. They look like a scary person. You don't know any facts of the matter. It may not have anything to do with a crime, in fact, um, but you made an assumption just based on looking on them. So that's something we have to be very careful of. It's part of the reason why, with all of this conversation, why is it so difficult for people to stay socially distant, is we're social creatures. That's the way um, our psychological makeup is. We like to be around other people. There's safety in numbers. There's, whether it's safety in that, if I think back to like caveman days, hey, you're a healthy looking male, you can help me fight off other people if they come to attack our tribe, so we're going to be friends, type thing. Sort of safety like that. There's safety in the fact that you can do things that I can't do, and I can do things that you can't do, and we can trade, and we can barter for things, and have a thriving civilization. So there's a lot of different ways that we look at this, and now we're being told that we can't be close to other people, we can't talk to other people, we got to be further away. If you're talking 6 feet away, that's getting in the difficult to talk to range, and so it's difficult for us to do because it goes against our very human nature. And people aren't. That's the one thing that I've not seen a lot of people explaining when they're talking about this, is it goes against our very human nature. We're drawn to other people, even in something as simple as an image on a web page. Um, and so we have to know how to handle that. We're having to actively think and undo our subconscious thoughts right now, society-wise, which is part of why we have that problem. But that subconscious part is very strong. It's what's kept us alive for tens of thousands of years. Is that deep-rooted psychological need to survive and what we understand, and that's brought forth even when we're looking at this photo. Now, if I've got a large group of people, I see, like, here's, if you bring everyone who works for a company and there's 150 people and everyone is like, this big on the screen, that's not going to have the same psychological uh, effect because they're so small, they're so far away. It's not going to really bring me in. Unless I'm like looking for someone, like, oh, my Uncle Bob works there. Let me go see if I can find Uncle Bob. Where is he? Oh, there he is. I see him. If it's not something like that, you're going to, uh, it's not going to have the same effect. So if you have a picture of people like this, you want 3 or less people. Um, if possible, you want the person either looking out towards the screen, or you want the person pointed towards something important on the website. So if I were to take this photo and split it in half, if you kind of think where that window frame is here, let me see if I can actually draw on this. Annotate. Okay. So if I were to come in here and draw this line, and look left and right and say, okay, if I put a picture of this person that's on my right-hand side, notice that they're looking to the left, I could put a menu, because what's going to happen is, psychologically, remember, this is deep-rooted things that are how our brain works. I see that they're looking off to the side. What are they looking at? I'm going to follow their eye line and see what I want. And so if I could put a picture of like the menu there, or how to order takeout, or something like that that's going to be important, I'm not thinking about it. This is happening subconsciously. I'm naturally drawn there. And the way they can tell that this happens actually is very similar to how I'm communicating with you right now. I've got a camera sitting on top of my monitor, and they've put cameras on top of monitors and sent people, websites, and said, okay, look at them. And the camera is tracking the eyeball and seeing where the eyeball's moving. So that's just how they figured this stuff out. And then they took this information to psychologists and said, why are people doing this? What's going on? If I look at the person on my left-hand side and he's looking to the right, then I want to put something on the right-hand side. This image is a good and bad image, because it's a warm, friendly type of image, but they're looking kind of at each other, not at something that I can beneficially use for my website. So that's something I have to really think about, um, when I'm putting together uh, my website and picking the right images that I want to use. Is this going to work for me, or do I need to take this into an image editor and modify it? If I've got Photoshop or Paint.net or something like that, I can work on figuring out how to make this the best photo that I need for what I'm doing. Okay, so that's a real important thing to just kind of always be thinking about in the back of your mind. And it's always a problem. I had my wife is actually a uh, marketing and advertising major. Um, she graduated back. Actually, she graduated before I did from UCF undergrad school. But oh, that's I forgot exactly where I was going with that. I just totally blanked. Oh my goodness. Sorry, I'm going back and trying to remember, pick up my thought again. I cannot believe I totally blanked on that. Picking the right image is very important when you're building something like this to make sure it's gonna fit. You want to make sure it's friendly faces. The problem my wife had, like I said, she was a marketing advertising major. Remember where it was going? Is she was dealing with a campaign, and the person who owned the company, instead of hiring models for their thing, they wanted to be in their own advertisements. Um, and that's not always the best thing. They weren't. Uh, I'm trying to be as nice as possible here, but they weren't overly attractive. They weren't real friendly looking and stuff like that. They're very good at what they did, and they were very high professional. But trying to convince them that maybe they're not the person who needs to be in the advertisement was a real difficult thing. So you want to make sure that your ads, any photos that you have, are going to be friendly looking, that they're going to match the color and layout scheme of your web page, so they look like they belong. If I had black web page with white text, that photo would really stand out. Um, so much so that that's the only thing that would be visible. Nothing else would matter. So you got to be careful it doesn't contrast or conflict with your website. You want it to be part of that repetition part of it, fitting in, blending in color wise and tone of the image, and the idea that that's conveying and stuff like that. So from a visual perspective, that's real important. Now the other thing that I have, and this is a very big deal, you can see this one right now actually with how my image is located, is if you look at the image, I have text up here, and on my screen it goes up here to Aenean, various, and then I've got this big image here. And if you look, this line of text right here is actually what goes up here with Aenean various. Okay, so I've got an image which is separating my text. So I'm breaking my rule of proximity. You might have thought, well, how could I break my rule of proximity? If I have a paragraph, it should just all be together, right? This image is actually doing it to you. Not what you intended, but it's what's occurring in this case. So I'm breaking my proximity rules, what goes with what. I'm in some cases I'm breaking my alignment rules because the bottom of the text lines up with the bottom of my image, but the top does not, and it creates this big space right here. This is actually called trapped white space. If you were a designer, that's what they call it. It just means that it's blocked off. There's nothing you can do with it, and it's just sitting there like a sore thumb. And that's a real problem. So let me show you the HTML so you can see what it looks like. Let me go back to mouse. Okay, so I have here my H1 tag, which you see up here. I have here a paragraph tag, which you see here and down here. And then I've got my image tag. My image tag is after my paragraph tag. So you would think that, well, maybe it would show up right, and it doesn't. I might say, well, maybe if I put a closing paragraph tag, because a closing paragraph tag, remember, is not required. So maybe you didn't put in there. It says, well, let me put it in here, and I'll come back and I'll refresh my screen and look at that. See how it fixed that so that now my text is all collected together. I got rid of that trapped white space. Okay, so even though the paragraph tag wasn't required to be closed, it still did matter. And that's the important thing. It can affect the way your website is laid out. Your image tag does not have to belong inside of a paragraph tag, but it can. And the browser, because it didn't see a closing paragraph tag, made some assumptions. And it made the assumption that it's inside at the end of that one paragraph tag, and it tried to insert the best it could. The problem is the best it could was not the best way that we needed it done. So this is always something that's you need to kind of keep also in the back of your head, is just because I don't have to do something doesn't mean I don't want to do something. Okay. Now, with this, there's a couple other solutions that I have that I can work with when I'm picking an image like this. I still have over here this huge trapped white space. Um, I can see over here where there's nothing there. That's causing a problem. My image is pushed off to my left. So I'm going to come over here. And I told you one of the things I always did is I always have an image left and an image right class that I put in. So I'm just going to say class into the image left. And when I do that, now my text comes up around it. You see that it works fine. You're like, okay, we're good. This is what I wanted. Now, my image, I do have some other issues, and these are some problems I'm going to have. Not all these are going to be solvable. So if I resize my screen real quick, you're going to notice that depending upon how big my image is, some stuff is going to flow down and around. Sometimes it's so wide I have empty space off to the bottom of my image. I've got some things I got to kind of figure out what's the best way possible to work with this. So because if I look at this, you know, here I'm pretty much got my alignment good. But the image kind of takes up a really big amount of space. I'm not sure that's right, that I want to do that. If I come over here, it doesn't take up all the space below my text. So maybe my image needs to be smaller. So I've got a few weird things like that that I can look at. So let's kind of take a look and delve into how that might be solvable. There's a couple ways I can do that. So inside my image tag, I can define the size I want my image to be. So I might put in width 300, 250, and height is going to be 200 approximately. If I reload this, notice my image becomes much smaller. My text definitely wraps around, but I do have a problem. Okay, I made an assumption on what I thought the image size ought to be, but now because my image has shrunk to be a certain size small, I have two issues. My first issue is some of the detail of my page or my image is no longer really visible. It's hard to see things like the glass and silverware and stuff like this on the table. So if my image is too small, I'm going to lose detail and I may not want to use that image. I may need to pick a different image if I need a small image. I might pick, just like I kind of drew that line down the middle of the image, I might just pick half of that image. That way the image fills up a little bit more of space and I see a little bit more. The other thing that I have the problem with, the second problem is I did not keep the aspect ratio of the height and width. And what that basically means is that I took an image that was like this, and I said, well, I needed to fit a smaller space. So I came in left and right, but not top and bottom the same proportion. So I might have shrunk this 80% left and right, but 90% top and bottom. And what happens with something like that is very simply, it now looks squished. And this can be squished either horizontally or vertically. I can do it both ways. Um, but it makes my image look distorted. And distortion is going to be obvious to our subconscious mind and cause me to not trust this web page as much. So we do have that problem. Something I got to keep in the back of my mind always is this web page building the reputation or trust of this uh, is the image building trust and reputation of the page? Is the page building trust and reputation of the site? Is the site building trust and reputation of the company that's representing, or the group or person or whatever? Okay. So you might say, well, it shouldn't let me do that, and you're right, but it does let you distort the image. So how can I solve that problem? Well, I can bring it into something like paint.net, which is a free program. And I can say, well, if I were to resize this to, let's say, 350, then it gives me my height that I should expect. I can hit cancel. Resize my height. And now I have a smaller image that is still proportional. It doesn't look distorted. And I got to figure out how am I going to handle detail being lost in a smaller image, and if that's a problem or not. But that's a problem for another day. Okay, I can solve some of those problems just by changing it. Now you might ask, am I supposed to put height and width here instead of inside my CSS? And that's a really great question. And the answer is it depends. So if I'm using a standard size image height and width on my web page, and so throughout my website, you're one of 2 or 3 image sizes, then I'll put that inside of a class. I don't want to have a class for every possible image that might be on my web page. That's just too much work. So I can put the height and width there. The other reason I might want to put the height and width there goes from a performance issue, and it speeds up a complex and long web page loading if the web browser knows how big the images are supposed to be. And the reason why is it handles what they call flow. And flow is just how does the browser display the content on the web page. And by knowing that there's an image of a certain size, even if it takes a little while for it to download, it puts a little placeholder blank spot in there and lets the rest of the text flow around it. And that's faster for the browser to do than to download it and then have to insert an image after the fact and cause it to reflow and reposition text and stuff. So there is legitimate reasons for doing it. You just have to kind of be aware of them. Now, like I said, this image is probably still a little bit too small as you're losing some detail. The image we saw before when we didn't put the height and the width in there, remember, if you're going to resize an image, it's best to do it in an application, not somewhere like this. If I've got a really big image, this might take up too much space, especially if I'm on a mobile device or something like that. You know, you don't want to have a situation, and I've seen this before, where you have something like this where it's just a line or 2 of text beside an image. That's too hard to read. That becomes hard to read. It's not good. No one likes that. Um, and so, if you remember, we talked about the picture tag and how you have multiple source elements. That's where that comes into play to make your web page be more visually appealing. But it's very easy to get images that are too big or too small. Uh, and in reality, if you remember the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, um, she was constantly going, "Oh, this porridge is too hot. This porridge is too cold. Oh, this one's just right. This bed is too hard. This bed is too soft. Oh, this one is just right." And the story never tells you how hot just right is. It never tells you how hard the just right bed is. It's a very subjective measure. But that's a lot of how images are inside of a web page. It's very subjective, but if you do it right, it makes for a much, much easier and much, much better viewing web page. And so you got to look at that through a lens, kind of like glasses like I wear, um, a lens of respect is according to what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to do. Some other hints that you want to be careful of for your web images on your website, and I'm going to show you based upon this image here. You can see that there's stuff in the background, but it's kind of hard to tell what it is. That can be a bit distracting. Something to consider is what your background is on your image. You don't want to distract someone with things that are in the background. You don't want to have people wearing bright, shiny jewelry or clothing and stuff like that if you can avoid it. If you look at the other pre-recorded video I have, I've got some images like of firefighters, and that's an exception because firefighters have that bright reflective gear to point them out to everyone, and that's an important thing. But if you can avoid stuff like that so that you don't get those bright reflections and stuff, that's always the best possible thing to do. My dad, I remember he used to shoot video for the church that he went to, and he would tell people, okay, if you're going to be on video, you need to wear solid colors. You want to wear your primary colors, things like a solid blue shirt or solid red shirt or solid, black shirt or something like that. So go with those solids. Maybe have a couple of stripes. You don't want flashy jewelry. You don't want flashy whatever, because the lights from the studio are going to reflect and it's going to be distracting. And wouldn't you know, the pastor's wife came in like a sequin type shirt. Um, would have looked great on a stage, but when you shoot video, it's very distracting. So having things in the background or something that's bright and shiny in the foreground that distracts from what the image is supposed to be conveying is very bad. So your images are very subjective. There's subjective size, there's subjective quality, but you want to make sure you don't have distracting things in them. And that's often going to be bright and shiny, or really dirty and grungy looking. I once saw people, they took wedding photos. Photographer didn't look at what they were doing, and they took photos of overflowing trash cans in the background. Um, Not the idea of what you're trying to convey with a nice wedding photo, to say the least. Um, so that caused issues, as you can imagine. Um, excuse me. Um, so like I said, they're subjective. You want to make sure the right size, right colors, nothing distracting. If you can have people in them, have people in them. Keep the number of people to pretty small, 3 or less, unless you're going for a big group. If you have too many, it loses effect. You'll see like kind of like this fall off effect as you add people. The effectiveness of the photo goes way down. If it's a photo of a um, product or an item, my recommendation is either have it by itself, just sitting there, or have it in action. So, if I've got a picture of a tennis racket, I'm trying to sell a tennis racket, and I've got a picture, it's just a racket sitting there on the web page, that's fine. If you have a good photo of someone, especially if it's like a celebrity endorsement type of thing, and they're playing with the racket, and you can clearly see the racket while they're playing tennis, or they're carrying it on or off the court type of thing, and you can clearly see the racket. That also works because it's in action. You see it doing what you expect it to do, and that's good. Um, but having the racket, just sitting on the bench with a bunch of other tennis gear, and it's just kind of strung about, that's not going to be real effective. So think about the effectiveness of what you're trying to convey. Always ask, what is it I'm trying to convey, and what does this image convey, and do those two messages match up? Okay. There's some other things about images you can look at and stuff. They're in that video, but those are the biggest parts that you want to look at, that we went over today. Resizing, applying them, making sure you close your tags, even if they're not technically required to be closed. It sometimes helps. assumptions are not a good thing for browsers. Any questions you guys might have about anything we covered today?
Oh,
No, I'm good.
All right. Well, I told you we'd get done a little bit early. Hopefully this has also helped you, since you'll be looking at putting images probably into um, your website, your portfolio type website. So think about that. If you have questions on it, you want to send me a picture and say, hey, does this work or not work or something like that, you're more than welcome to do that, or come to office hours and we'll be happy to talk about them. I'm going to give you guys the last 30 minutes or so of class. That way you have extra time. You can start working on projects, or if you got other stuff for other classes going on, you're more than welcome to do that as well. Thank you all for coming, and I will talk to you all on Monday, if not earlier.
all right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.